We're going to get started. First of all, welcome. We have a lot of people who've registered for today's webinar. And for those of you who are completely new, my name is Elizabeth Cipolla, and I am your weekly host of this webinar series. Typically, we don't have technical issues like this. This is kind of a first, so thank you for your patience as we work through some of those. A couple things I wanted to go over before we get too far into anything. I wanted to just review with you what it is that we'll be covering today. And what we're going to be doing is a welcome by Aaron Phillips. Aaron and I work very closely together here at Decision Associates. And Aaron always kicks us off by saying a few words and just welcoming everybody officially. Then I'm going to get into introducing today's presenter, myself, and also our guest presenter. We're then going to transition to some announcements and a review of some previously sent Q&A that was submitted to me. And then after that, we're going to delve into some employer compliance Q&A featuring our guest speaker. So without further ado, and I was just receiving a call. I just want to make sure it wasn't an issue with our guest speaker. Bear with me. Okay, so let me just introduce myself and Aaron a little bit to you. So as I said, my name's Elizabeth Cipolla, and as you can see, Aaron and I, we both work together here at Decision Associates as executive consultants. Each of us have the exact same amount of experience in terms of number of years, but as you can see, looking at the screen in front of you, we both bring different perspectives. I always like to clarify and qualify at the beginning of all of these webinars. Neither Aaron nor I are attorneys. Neither Aaron nor I are medical professionals. And the reason I specify that is because if you have any medical specific questions related to COVID-19, Aaron and I are probably not the people you want to ask. But what we do offer is some excellent insight, having been in the profession of human resources and having served in executive capacities throughout the course of our careers. So not only that, but as you can see, we represent many different industries and have a lot of really good perspective to share. The next thing I wanted to do is just give you a little bit of information about our guest presenter today, and you're going to have some time to hear from him later, of course. But Mark Kuhar, he works for a firm actually based here out of Erie, and we are really, really excited to have Mark join us. Couple things I just wanted to say, aside from what you see there on the screen, he does have an emphasis in his legal practice on the litigation of employment claims. He routinely practices before the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, numerous state and federal courts, and in matters before the National Labor Relations Board, as well as in the processing and resolution of grievances and arbitration proceedings. So I just wanted to share some of those little tidbits of about our presenter. Not only has Mark you know, achieved many great things in terms of his educational credentials, but also, as you can see, he has a lot to bring to the table. I will be unmuting Mark so he can officially introduce himself in just one moment. Before we do that, I wanted to give Aaron an opportunity to welcome everybody and kick us off like we often do. So Aaron, just give me one moment. All right, Aaron.
Good morning, everyone. And again, thank you, Elizabeth, for all the work
Aaron,
you're putting in.
Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
All right, I do know that Aaron was having difficulties with his phone earlier, so I am wondering if he isn't having those same problems now. So I apologize, but it looks like Aaron won't be able to join us. So I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm not sure why that is happening. Okay, So because we had to have Mark join us from his phone, I believe, I'm going to need to pull him up from his cell phone number. So bear with me one moment. Let me just find that. So I'm going to be unmuting some of these phone participants. Why is my, okay, so, Mark, is that you? Okay, Mark. Oh. All righty. I guess that is not Mark. Bear with me one second. Mark, is that you?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, praise the Lord Jesus. Okay. Yay. So the technical gods are in my favor again. So thank you, Mark. I believe everybody should definitely be able to hear you.
Okay, sorry about that delay, everybody. Thanks for your patience.
Absolutely.
It's very, very nice to be speaking with you. Appreciate the opportunity. You know, I understand there's going to be something on the screen to help people understand who I am and what I do. And so, Elizabeth, I'm eager to get to it as soon as you're ready.
Okay, absolutely. And Mark, just so you know, because we've had some very strange technical issues this morning, I'm going to keep you unmuted rather than play around with having another potential glitch by trying to unmute you again. So, so we're going to go through this right now. And Mark, for those of you who aren't aware, some part of the technical issues we were having were involving his ability to see what is physically being shown on the screen. So I'm going to be talking out loud and just sharing the questions that you have with Mark so that he can answer them live. All right, so we're just going to go through a couple of announcements. A friendly reminder I wanted to give everybody, and you can all see it on your screen right now, but there will be a webinar on Thursday, May 14th from 11 to 12 being put on by the Erie Regional Chamber and Growth Partnership. And specifically for this webinar, I will be co-presenting with Wei-Shin Lei. And Wei-Shin is a very, very highly regarded and very successful business owner that is based, she's based here out of Erie, but she also has a very strong scientific background, having previously worked in her own private medical practice and also having previously been recruited by the CDC, although she ultimately decided not to work there. She does have a very solid background and has a lot of excellent medical and scientific information to share as it relates to considerations for you as business leaders to re-enter, you know, quote unquote, typical operations based upon all we've been enduring with COVID-19. Then I will cover the last part of that webinar where I will touch upon some of the operational considerations and some of the compliance considerations as it relates to re-entry into, again, quote unquote, typical operations since this whole COVID-19 thing has been sprung upon us. And another thing I just wanted to clarify, an important announcement regarding how we're going to be handling today's webinar. So for today's webinar, I decided based upon the large number of questions that I've been getting from a lot of you throughout this week, which has been great, keep them coming. But based upon the large number of questions, I actually decided to make a last minute call, and I am going to have Mark participate with us. He has graciously agreed to do so for the entirety of this webinar. I am going to be presenting him with some questions that many of you previously submitted throughout this week, and he will be answering those. There are a total of 4 questions. Since several of you submitted the same or very similar questions, I just kind of melded some of them into one. And then for the duration of our time together, Mark is going to be answering the questions live. So again, as I see many of you have already started to do, please type your questions into the Q&A dialog box throughout the webinar. I will read them aloud, and then Mark will answer them live. So I wanted to make sure everyone knows about that. Before we turn it over to Mark, as I always do, I wanted to just share with the group 2 questions that were submitted prior to today's session that I wanted to make sure everybody, receives the benefit of hearing what the response was. And as you know, for those of you who've been with us, and as you may not know, for those of you who are new, every time we have a webinar, all of you, of course, receive repeated invitations if you choose to join future webinars, and all of those who've enrolled in webinars receive the benefit of having the option to contact me either through email or through phone or text me throughout the week with any of your specific questions that are HR related to which you would like some guidance. I know the vast majority of people on the phone either A, don't have an HR professional on board, or B, you yourself are an HR professional, but so much is changing and so much is happening in real time that you could definitely use the additional support. So that's what we're here to do, and there's no charge for that, of course. But the question that I wanted to read first that was submitted goes like this. We have 6 people on our team. Everybody is working from home except for me. I'm the executive director. I'm beginning to question how many hours team members are working each day, as well as their focus when working. How can I address this? I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this question, since the vast majority of us on this call each week have people that are working remotely, and it definitely is different managing your employees remotely compared to the quote-unquote old-fashioned way of managing them. So here is what I shared. And I'm not going to bore you by reading my response word for word verbatim, because you can certainly see the answer on the screen. But just a couple highlights I'd like to go over. So first of all, it obviously is looking like many of us will likely be working remotely, some or all of the time for the foreseeable future. So it is important to manage this properly. And I'm glad this person sent the question they did to me. For those of you who were able to join us for the April 10th webinar, please reference all of the materials that you received, including the webinar recording, slide deck, and also you may recall that I had created and sent to you a remote work team management toolkit that provides a lot of best practices that you'll want to follow. And much of what you need to do as it relates to the question that was asked just a few moments ago that I read to you, it is sufficiently captured in those resources. However, if you are a first timer and you did not receive those materials but would like to, all you have to do is send me an email. Everyone on this webinar has my email address and the confirmation you received in order to participate. So all you have to do is send me an email and request those materials, and I'll be happy to send them to you. So let me just point out a few things that are important to keep in mind when not only you're managing a remote team, but really any team. And it's really, really important, of course, to ensure that everybody's on the same page. And just as you would address performance concerns or issues with employees who may be underperforming in a traditional work place, let's say, people that are working face-to-face in an enclosed office, you're going to need to do the same for remote employees. So some pointers that I just wanted to share with everybody and that I shared with this individual, just like you would approach any project, you're going to want to establish and very clearly communicate a plan and also the goals for whatever it is you want them to accomplish. One thing that's a little bit different as it relates to managing a remote workforce is that you have to be very, very explicit about the rules of engagement. So what are your expectations in terms of work hours? What are your expectations in terms of how accessible and available you want them to be? You want to make sure that you clearly communicate these, like I just said, rules of engagement, so everybody's on the same page. Once you clearly communicate the expectations, the goals, what it is you want them to do, and clearly communicate your priorities and set appropriate deadlines as needed, then what you want to do is maintain communication about the status of their progress. You want to check in with your employees at least once daily, just for a brief, even if it's only a 5-minute touch base, just for a brief touch base. And if you're on this webinar and you say, I have 30 employees, I can't do that, that's fine. Presumably you have other people in leadership roles who can participate in that, and therefore, just have some sort of direct communication with your employees who are working remotely at least once a day. And in addition to that, you definitely want to set a weekly meeting to discuss the status of current projects, and that's going to be a little bit more involved, and that's also a really excellent time so that you can see how they're doing. You can, find ways that you can further support them if they have questions. And you're definitely going to want to make sure you're not micromanaging them, but you want to set check-in milestones regularly and, follow what it is you say you're going to do. Hold them accountable, but also be very supportive. And you can always, of course, use technology, and some of the technology that I know a lot of people use are Microsoft Workplace Analytics, but that can help track individual productivity. So that's the answer that I have provided to that question. The next question that was submitted prior to today's session that I wanted to share goes like this. Our company has employees that filed for partial unemployment due to reduced hours being scheduled. Our hours are starting to pick up, and when contacting these employees, they are refusing to return to work because they are making more with unemployment and the extra $600 per week. Is the employee eligible to collect unemployment if they are refusing available work? So Attorney Mark Kuhar is going to provide much more clarification about this question momentarily when I turn it over to him in a few moments. But here's the answer that I had shared. Basically, according to the Pennsylvania Department of Labor, the compensation laws provide in part that an employee shall be ineligible for compensation for any week in which their unemployment is due to failure without good cause to accept suitable work, provided that you, the employer, who has offered the work to them, notifies the department of their refusal within 7 days from when the offer for them to come back to work has been made. So I know there's been some confusion about this because there's a press conference a couple of weeks ago where Governor Wolf said that if a person fears for their life, that would be considered good cause to refuse work. So Mark Kuhar is going to provide some really helpful clarification about this question momentarily. But one thing I know Mark will definitely agree with, and Mark is unmuted so he can certainly chime in, is that if you have an employee telling you, I'm not coming back to work because I make more on unemployment, and I'd rather just collect unemployment, that wouldn't necessarily be considered good cause. Mark, do you have anything you wanted to add to that before I move on?
Well, sure. Just, and I do need to preface this to say this is not legal advice. This is general information, and I hope it's useful, but technically it's not legal advice. I have to disclaim according to the rules of my firm and my license whenever we present. Okay, so having said that, yeah, on the 20th of April, the governor said that we should just basically triple our salaries if we want people to not stay at home and receive unemployment because that was their option to do so. He retracted that statement a couple of days later, not the problematic economic part of it, but the part where he was saying that they could refuse to come back and still receive unemployment, which was factually an inaccurate statement. So he retracted that midweek last week. If you Google that, Governor Wolf clarifies statements regarding unemployment. The listeners can find links to the underlying story, the comment, and as well essentially the retraction, which he then uses as another opportunity to talk about increasing the minimum wage. So that's that on the governor's comments. But at its core, if an employee is solely just refusing because of his desire to receive more money, not working via the unemployment plus the 600 unemployment from the feds, then right, the governor's wrong, and your statement, Elizabeth, is correct that the employee should not be eligible for unemployment of either type at that point. And if you want to tell somebody about it, the best way is to use the UC fraud, PAUC fraud hotline, or their email address. If you Google reporting UC fraud in PA, you'll end up there. Those are my best suggestions. You probably have 50,000 emails going to those to that destination, but that's really your best option. And to watch your charges. As the statement of charges to your account come in over time, watch those and then quote, request relief from charges if you think you've been charged improperly because employees had turned down work, for example, or were receiving FFCRA leave. Now, all kinds of things can come into the mix here. I'm not coming back to work because you won't require my coworkers to wear masks. You won't put up the plastic shields required of retail establishments. You won't assure that sanitation is used, et cetera, et cetera. If an employee is refusing to come back because of perceived unsafe conditions, and she brings that to the attention of management, which does not take appropriate remedial steps, then that employee could convert him or herself to UC eligible again. And additionally, if an employee is staying home for other reasons not in your question, like they have they are immunocompromised themselves, or they are caring for children whose school is closed, not sure that's going to work over the summer, shouldn't, when school would be closed anyway, but for the time being, that should suffice too. So there are lots of things that an employee can say in addition to what you read, Elizabeth, that would make them eligible, but at its core, what you said is correct, and unfortunately what the governor said, which is creating a lot of confusion, was factually inaccurate.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. And Mark, since I'm just going to clarify this point right here. So Mark obviously is an attorney in the state of Pennsylvania. We do have many people on this webinar joining us who are from states such as New York, Ohio, and Indiana. So please, if you are from those states, everything that Mark said is still accurate for your state with a couple of exceptions, one of which is where he suggested you go look to report concerns and cases of unemployment fraud. So you're just going to want to go to your respective state Department of Labor website and get that information in order to report any concerns regarding unemployment fraud on the part of any of your employees, so that it can be appropriately looked into and responded to as such. But I just wanted to clarify that for those of you who aren't from Pennsylvania, you know, and make sure that everybody understands that. All right. So as you just heard from Mark Kuhar, and you can all see his contact information on the screen, he is going to be our featured guest presenter. I am going to be turning it over to him in just about 60 seconds here. But before I do so, I wanted to go over a couple of things. We are first going to go over questions that were sent in advance that Mark will answer. And you can see on your screen right now the first question that was submitted, which I will read aloud so he can provide an answer to it. And then after we're done going through those 4 questions, we're going to use the rest of our time for me to read through the questions that Mark is being asked live here through the live Q&A component. So as you have questions, type them in and we will get to them. But the first question I'm going to read aloud. All right, Mark. Question 1. What do I do if an employee refuses to come back to work because they are afraid of getting COVID-19? Will their unemployment claim be denied since we have work available? Now, Mark, you did touch upon this just in what you said just prior. Is there anything else you wanted to expand upon?
I would say first, have a conversation. Why? What specifically? You know, is it just a matter of being outside your house? Is it a matter of being in this workplace in particular? If so, why? Have a conversation and play it out. Because number one, you might actually be able to share them some information, share some information with them that would help. You know, they may have irrational fears. Most of them that I'm running into are not justifiable based upon CDC guidelines, PA, or even Erie County Department of Health guidelines. And so there's a chance that you can talk them out of some hysteria or some other irrational fear, and that would be very nice to do. And also, you know, may end up helping them change their mind or maybe be willing to work under some special accommodations. But also, it puts you in a position to defense against their UC claim in the sense that when they file and say that I was afraid of this, and maybe they point to something, you know, that they think is not fully compliant with precautionary measures, then you can say, well, number one, not only did they not bring that to my attention and give me a chance to remediate it, when I asked them what might be the problem, they expressed ABC and now are trying to get unemployment based upon, you know, DEF, which they should not get unemployment for any safety-based concern unless they brought it to our attention and gave us a chance to remediate. So you would be basically preventing that claim. Now, having said that, and you can kind of hear the enthusiasm in my voice about unemployment claims, because I deal with a lot of those, and a lot of them are valid, but a lot of them are not. And I, over the years, have helped employers, try to keep their unemployment tax rate down, based upon claims that shouldn't be granted. A little different environment here, and the interest in unemployment should be a little bit muted, in the sense that on March 27th, the governor signed a law, an amendment to our unemployment law that said if it's, quote, COVID related, it's not going to be charged to our accounts. So it's less it's less of an interest in preserving our tax rates. You have to make sure that the UC system knows that that's an alleged COVID related unemployment claim if it's granted, to benefit from that. But it's less about tax rates anymore, and more about trying to cajole people back into work, and frankly, on a human level, helping relieve some of the anxiety, most of which is not based upon science.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Question 2. I have an employee who is refusing to wear a face mask. How should I handle this? And this is the question that I received from a lot of people, Mark. Some of the reasons the participants on today's webinar had given me that their employees had given them for why they were refusing to wear the face mask included breathing difficulties, the fact that it produced anxiety and stress, things of that nature. So what do you have to say about that? I know a lot of people are curious how to navigate that.
Well, one has to adjust this based upon their state, as your prior remarks would indicate. So one has to look at the origin of the mask order. I'm going to proceed as if we're talking about the mask and related safety things, precautions relative to Pennsylvania, but it would be a parallel analysis, just done with a different order in a different locale. But the FAQs that were issued, I'm going to say 10 days ago, Monday, so the Monday prior to the Monday of this week, the Secretary of Health issued FAQs. And if you don't have those, please do look at those. They were extremely helpful. In other words, they made the mask requirement in particular seem more doable. And among other things along those lines was an indication that employees who have disability-related bases, whether it's claustrophobia or limited lung efficiency from COPD or the like, who either couldn't or shouldn't wear masks, or frankly, if you're hanging over a lathe, pretty sure we don't want and I'm pretty sure OSHA would agree that we don't want the employees wearing masks. We wouldn't allow them to have long hair hanging over that lathe. So if there are OSHA issues, safety issues, disability issues, including emotional issues, then you're, quote, relieved of the mask obligation as an employer, but both because it seems like the right thing to do based upon everyone's perception of this, and because in Pennsylvania, they say we're supposed to kind of do our best. There are alternatives that are permitted, again, in those FAQs. So for example, face shields, and although those are perceived as being hard to get, in my recent experience, they're not. And in fact, there's a large local employer who's making thousands of them a day. And if someone were interested, I could help make a connection there. They're available for sale. But in any event, you can use bandanas, masks, scarves, and under some circumstances, you can just excuse them, straight up excuse them. There are many employees, if you look out your window, who are going up utility poles. They're not wearing masks because they're not FR rated, and it would be a very bad thing if they had a contact incident. So there are a bunch of situations for a bunch of reasons why employees would not be wearing masks, including, for example, people in interior offices are also excused in those FAQs. Again, all of that with respect to Pennsylvania. I encourage others to look at their closure order and any related FAQs or other interpretive guidance that they might have.
Okay. Now, one additional follow-up question I have to what you just shared, Mark. I know you said, for example, they can wear bandanas or just something, anything, but one of our webinar participants had submitted a question just now in relationship to what you were just saying, and they want to know if there are any specific specifications on what type of mask to use or how it fits. Do you know of anything?
Well, The CDC does have guidelines regarding, what a mask should look like, what it, it should cover your nose and your mouth, for example. And if you Google CDC guidelines for making a mask, you can find those. So that's an answer to that question. But again, as to the Pennsylvania listeners, the FAQs issued, I'm going to try to peg that at the 20th. I think it would be either late on Sunday the 19th or early on the 20th of April. The FAQs actually say, even if there's no reason to, you can wear a scarf or bandana instead. So, and I'm not, nobody's listening to me talk because they think I'm a microbiologist. I'm not saying what, what's prudent. You can have whatever standards you want. But compliance did become a lot more flexible, I'll say, in Pennsylvania as of that date with those FAQs. I don't know if, am I being fully responsive to that question?
Yes, you are. Yep, absolutely. All right, next question. I have a small retail storefront that only has about 2 to 5 visitors per week. Do I still have to follow the safety orders for businesses with in-person operations?
And particularly, I think they're asking about those with respect to retail sales, right?
Right. Where they have people from the public coming and visiting them on site. Since they only have anywhere from only 2 to 5 people per week, do they still have to follow those safety orders?
Well, the shortest answer is there is no exemption for people whose visitors are infrequent or few in number. Mm-hmm. Okay, so to the extent that you are offering a retail option like that, you're as covered as Walmart technically, and that may strike you as crazy or what have you. I'm just trying to be clear, not trying to be provocative on that. But there are no exceptions for those characteristics that your retail operation has. Having said that, I'm guessing that there might be some barriers to you doing it, because if it was easy, meaning putting up a plexiglass barrier and isolating your retail worker from these, if it were easy, you probably would have done it and not asked the question. So there might be some barriers. To that possibility, I would say again, in PA, look at the FAQs issued on the 20th, because in there it's riddled with, we expect employers and others to do the best they can, I've never seen a regulation that had do the best they can so many times woven into it. You got to file your taxes and pay income taxes on income, best you can. I mean, we don't have any drive 55 miles an hour, best you can. We don't have any, other aspects of our society that were so loosely described as in those FAQs, with all these best you cans. Also, I'll tell you that to my knowledge, we have not had an Erie County business that was involuntarily sanctioned for this. Somebody's hand might go up somewhere, and if so, I apologize for under reporting your situation. But I am personally not aware of any enforcement actions, and I will tell you that I have been doing a little bit of retail shopping lately, and I would say compliance is something like 50% at best. Now, that's certainly not what DA or I am suggesting you should do. I would just say that, if you're a business that's supposed to be open, somebody, and even the governor, thinks you ought to be open. And so, rubber hits the road. The governor wants you to be open. If you can do it the way he thinks is safe and his Secretary of Health thinks are safe, do it. If you have to make slight modifications, that's up to you. And I'm sorry, I can't be more definitive on that.
Right, absolutely. No, we do appreciate it. All right, next question. So this question has a few different components to it, so I'm going to read it out loud. Okay, Mark? We have received a PPP loan. We were paying our part-time staff half of their regularly scheduled hours. Now we can pay them the full for their regularly scheduled hours. When the unemployment claims come in, how should we be reporting what we are paying them? If they are now getting their full average hours, then they shouldn't be eligible for unemployment at all, correct? Does it make a difference how we record the hours if they are not working? I've just been entering the total amount of hours on Mondays in our payroll system and labeling it as miscellaneous hours since they are not really working.
Okay, and this is one where I do remind us all that if it's COVID related, if the unemployment these people are experiencing is COVID related, and I'm taking from this question that it is, and you have or do alert the UC system to it, and this again is Pennsylvania, and I am 99% on Ohio too. But if it's COVID related, you're not going to be charged. So your interest in managing your exposure to those claims immediately drops. So in this case, how do you characterize it? Now, this is an interesting issue too. When you give money to your employees, most of the time it's because they're working, right? But sometimes not. So, for example, severance payments are for employees who are not working. Vacation pay, again, right? Or gratuitous payments. You had a COVID issue, so you kept everybody's pay going for 2 or 3 days. There traditionally have been different reasons why you would pay people not for working, and there have been more lately. Generally speaking, those are not to be noticed by the UC system. Like the UC system is not supposed to hold any number of gratuitous payments which are not for services provided. Unless it's for a finite period of leave, meaning a vacation. So if you laid off a bunch of employees on March 16th because of the closure, and you kept their pay going for some period of time, and you did not tell the employees when they were coming back, how could you have? Technically, they are able to get your pay that you're giving them, and this would apply now to your PPP pay, so your pay financed with PPP dollars, but they're technically entitled to your free money, state unemployment, and the $600. In other words, unless you have a finite period of time when they're coming back, which most don't, and this pay is basically PTO, here's your PTO for 2 weeks off. If it's not that, and it's basically just gratuitous money from you, and it doesn't matter where it came from, that it's PPP money, for example, but it's gratuitous money for you, not for services provided during the work week, they can pocket that, still get unemployment, and get $600 more, which is, I can hear the hair follicles, being pulled out right now. I don't blame you. It was not my idea, but that's my read on the situation.
Okay. Now, John Miller, who's a participant on today's webinar, has raised his hand indicating he'd like to ask you some further clarification on something you just said. So I've unmuted him, I believe. Let's hope again we're having clear help here. John, are you there? I don't know why this is happening. It's saying that you're unmuted and that you're permitted to speak. John, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay, my question is, are you able to pay full-time wages and the employee not work under PPP? I thought the idea was to bring them back to work.
Hi, John.
Hi, Mark.
The answer to your question is PPP doesn't care whether the employer is getting anything for the money that it gives employees or not. Okay. And from the kind of inflection in your voice, that may not make perfect sense to you, I'm guessing. But PPP says you can put it in Christmas stockings hung over the fireplace. You can give it to them because they worked hard that week. They worked so-so that week. If you give them the money, then both with respect to forgivability and in terms of determining whether you've properly spent at least 75% of the PPP proceeds, the system, the rules don't care whether employees in turn, did anything productive for you or not. Am I being responsive, John?
Yes. So one further question. What about bonuses?
Well, this is a whole nother subject, and
okay.
I don't want to, it's a great question, John, and I think it's one that's under discussed, but I just don't want to deviate too far from the Q&A format. But think about this, to all the listeners, think about this. If you have bonuses, I had a company call the other day and say we usually give bonuses in September and again in December. December being bigger because it's a Christmas bonus. And we're trying to decide what we want to distribute all the PPP money. you know, can we give them the September bonus? I said, I am not our office's PPP expert. They are Mark Denlinger and Elliot Ehrenreich. Okay, so I have to footnote this, but Mark Denlinger was on the phone with me, and I said, well, can't we give them their Christmas bonus, their Thanksgiving bonus, their September bonus? Can't we give it all to them now and call that, you know, use PPP money to do that? And he said, based on the regs, which you know change frequently, but based on the regs as of a day and a half ago, he didn't see why not. They don't care as long as it's, meaning the whole PPP SBA system and its rules don't care as long as it's money going from you to the employee, with some exceptions for highly comped employees and so forth. Is that responsive?
Oh, I muted him, but just because we have some additional questions.
Okay.
But thank you so much, John, for raising your hand and asking those additional questions. So Mark, I know this question had several components to it. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover before we move on?
No, thank you.
Okay, excellent. So now we are moving on to the new questions that people have been typing in. And the first question, and I'm just doing a time check, so we have about 13 minutes left. So the first question has to do with voluntary and mandatory layoffs, and it goes like this. We have had voluntary and mandatory layoffs. We have called some people back. We have also offered a few to go back on payroll and to stay at home due to their known health concerns. I've had one employee tell me that they did not want to go back on payroll due to making more money from unemployment. Can I fight to be released from these unemployment charges?
Yes, you definitely can, would be point B, but point A would be you should not have to. Again, if you want to Google it, you could Google, hold on here, let me think. I'm going to give you the wrong act number. I want to say PA Senate Bill 68 for the Pennsylvanians, but I'm not sure. But very easily, I found it in Ohio, with which I'm not as familiar anyway. But if you Google relief from charges, unemployment, COVID-19, you Google those things, within your first half a dozen search results will be some kind of a link to your state law, if they have one, indicating, as Pennsylvania does, as of 3/27, that says that in the case of Pennsylvania, for calendar year 2020, if it's COVID related, you don't get charged for it anyway. Mm-hmm. So, again, as I said earlier, I've helped a lot of employers for 25 years keep their unemployment rate down. But this is one where your motive in having people break from the dependency on unemployment is more to get workers back, and your traditional motive of managing down your unemployment tax rate is really not present, as long as you do your best to assure that these cases are COVID flagged. And then when you get your statement of charges, periodically from the UC system, if you see any on there that were COVID related, you need to assert yourself and try to get those recharacterized as COVID related, in which case the system will eat it. You will not be charged for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just a comment from someone who heard your previous response. According to my accountant, if you give a bonus on a regular basis, then you can use the PPP for bonuses. I don't know if you have any.
That's good information. That's good information. I'm glad everybody heard that. And as I said, I footnoted that because the implication of that is that if it's a bonus out of nowhere, you can't, right? And that may be accurate. Again, PPP is technically a little outside of traditional HR in my view. And so I indicated there were two experts in my office. I wasn't one of them, but as of a recent conversation, they did not describe it as narrowly, but I'm glad that the listeners all heard that. And again, it's a evolving topic, and it's one where you got to keep asking, because people are doing their best to give you good answers. And I would ask a couple, three, before I made any decisions based on these. And by the time you go to implement it a week and a half from now, ask it again, because there may be new guidance on it.
Isn't that the truth? That is definitely the truth. That's why it's been so helpful, people checking in on these things regularly, just as you stated. Next question. Do we expect any policing of business entities for safety precaution compliance? or will it be monitored by direct complaints only? I have a friend working in a manufacturing company where recommended masking and employee temp screening is not being done, but no one wants to say anything and buck the boss. And I think it's important to clarify too, it's not recommended. And Mark, if you could expand upon this, because we've had a lot of people calling us. I know Aaron and I were talking about it even this morning. A lot of people have been asking us, well, isn't it just a recommendation that you wear masks? So I just kind of captured, I gathered that from the phrasing in this question as well. But what are your thoughts in regards to any policing of business entities for safety precaution compliance?
I suspect that it's going to depend on the jurisdiction in which you're at, but that it's going to be somewhere between very low and very, very low, because frankly, there's just so many employers out there, so many manufacturers, retail establishments, et cetera. I think it's going to be almost entirely, if not entirely, complaint driven. And I happen to be talking to, for example, in Erie County's case, Erie County solicitor, who's a friend of mine actually. You know, he said that their enforcement efforts have been almost exclusively just dealing with complaints that come up. And then I've also talked to a bunch of employers. I bet some on the phone or on the webinar could relate to this. I have been involved with or interacting with a bunch of employers who have had a visit, typically from a member of the Erie County Department of Health, for those in this area, and a state trooper, who say, show me what you're doing. And they say, look at our lunchroom, look at our hand sanitizer, look at this, look at that. And they have been pretty painless audits, or even at the beginning, why are you open? Well, because we make, you know, plastic parts that go into medical devices. Okay. You know, and the state trooper, frankly, doesn't even know what he's looking at. And they backed off pretty quickly. So maybe more than you needed, but I have no reason to think that in PA, they're going to just start going through business directories and auditing people. And that, frankly, is going to get harder and harder to do anyway, as more businesses open up, right? I mean, keeping compliance, assuring compliance among those who are allowed to be open is about to get a lot more challenging for those responsible for that, right? And but to Elizabeth's point, yeah, it's not a recommendation. She's correct. And here's the odd part too, though, is that if you do have an employee who has 15% lung capacity from COPD, for example, which I do have that. I was talking to somebody about that the other day. And this is a person who's eagerly going to work, but he's going to wear his mask because he's helping out the nursing home patients who need him. But when you have somebody like that, and maybe they're not wearing the mask, in his case, he's trying when he can, but he needs to take it off to take deep breaths occasionally. His coworkers may misunderstand that as non-compliance. What are we going to do? Tell the coworkers, you know, that hey, your friend here has, your coworker here has COPD and all these other problems. Oh, obviously we can't. Obviously we can't, right? So they're inevitably going to get reported, and they're going to get a visit, but I expect it to go, quote, okay.
Okay. All right. Very good. Appreciate that. Next question. Let me just discuss that. Okay. Gratefully, our organization has remained open with no layoffs needed. Is there any discussion regarding hazard pay for those of us who get to continue working? Some employees are frustrated that those who are laid off at other employees who are getting these added benefits, but only for employees within essential businesses. Wait, let me read that again. I'm sorry, it's worded awkwardly. Let me read that again. Gratefully, our organization has remained open with no layoffs needed. Is there any discussion regarding hazard pay for those of us who get to continue working? Some employees are frustrated that those who are laid off at other employers are getting these added benefits, but employees with essential businesses are not. Okay, I misread that the first time. I apologize.
Yeah, so I mean, there isn't one of us. I mean, this is as much psychology, human psychology, behavior, motivating engagement, which I know is something that Elizabeth and Aaron and I are all passionate about, and others at DA, and I'm sure a lot of the people on the phone call. This is about managing perceptions of fairness. to be clear, there is no way that anybody can view what's going on as, quote, fair. And even what do I mean by that? I mean, every one of us can point to somebody who's getting some situation that's better than us. And I think most of us are, kind of mature enough to say, thank God I'm not sick. Nobody I love is sick, and I have a job, right? I mean, that's, there's a little meme that's floating around that says, keeping your job is the new raise. I guess it's funny, not really, right? But anyway, so I think those of us that are kind of evolved and mature can say, yeah, true, someone else is getting double what they made at Dollar Tree on unemployment, and that's not fair. We can say it, we can deserve it, but it doesn't change our behavior, eat us up, right? And I think that's my recommendation, is to have as many conversations with people as possible to show you care and to express empathy, and I understand that, and certainly, we wouldn't want to try to tell them they're looking at it wrong or anything. There's unfairness all over the place. But as far as the hazard pay goes specifically, working with about 100 to 125 employers, some a lot more frequently than others, as of this moment, I'm not aware of any of my employers who are providing hazard pay. Probably a couple are, and I don't know about it. But the point is, it's not pervasive for sure. And so I have had a few conversations about it. Keep in mind, it does become part of your regular rate for Fair Labor Standards Act purposes. If you do pay it, in other words, you have to pay overtime on it. And, most of my clients are limping. And so to increase your labor costs by, 15 or 18% with hazard pay, right. I'm not sure how those who are doing it are doing it. Like, I'm not sure how they're making it happen. I'm happy they are. But anyway, I understand why somebody would want that, why they'd ask for it, why they'd sense the unfairness. It's all legitimate reactions to this. But just in terms of, for what it's worth, I have very, very, like I said, I have no employees doing it to my knowledge. No employers doing it to my knowledge.
Okay, excellent. Now, one thing I'd like to throw out to the group, and if you could just type in real quick, let me know your thoughts. Just type in yes if this is something that you have found beneficial, and if this is something that you would like us to do at another time at some point in the future. And what I'm talking about is having a guest presenter, such as, of course, Mark Kuhar, who is a subject matter expert in the legal side of things, present. So please type that in say yes, if that's something you'd be interested in. Mark, you'll be very happy to know that not only am I seeing a lot of yeses, but I'm seeing some yeses in all caps with multiple exclamation points afterwards, so good job. One last question that was just thrown in, and then we will wrap for the day. Are you able to pay full wages for no work performed under PPP?
I have to footnote it by saying that, I have two partners who are the experts in that, but I am under the very clear impression that PPP does not distinguish between whether the money is being applied to for work performed or not. I have medical practices who got PPP loans who are not authorized to even open. They're paying their employees for not working, or for, quote, working at home, which sometimes is very viable, and sometimes it looks an awful lot like watching TV. Right. And so I have lots of clients who are either paying people to work at home, which is in some cases, not really working, and others who are just paying them. And let's put it this way. I guess we'll know 6 months from now for sure, but all of the people that I'm talking to about issues like this, including people who, unlike me, are claiming to be subject matter experts in PPP loans, all of them are saying the same thing. They're all saying it doesn't matter whether you're getting these services for the money that you give an employee or not. That's a proper application of PPP, and it's something for which you can take credit in terms of, should your loan be forgiven.
Okay. Okay, excellent. So, Mark, the whole time you've been speaking, everybody has been able to see not only your beautiful picture, but also your contact information. So please feel free if you have any subsequent questions. I'm sure Mark, as he's able, would be happy to connect with you. Also, too, just for those of you who would like our contact information, it is on the screen right now. So if you have any additional questions, let me know. We are going to pick up for next week's webinar for the formal prepared content portion of it with what originally I had intended to cover this week. And that would be part one of a two-part focus, adjusting your people management practices for the new normal. And the three areas that we're going to be focusing upon next week are training and development, performance management, and benefit considerations. So once again, that will be for the prepared portion of next week's webinar. But again, Mark, thank you so much. We really appreciated you hanging in there with us when we had those technical glitches in the beginning. And from the feedback I'm seeing coming in, everybody found it really, really beneficial for you to be with us today.
All right. Well, real quickly to you and Aaron and DA, thank you very much for this opportunity to reach out. Thank you very much for all the people who spent time on this, listening to me and sent me questions and so forth. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much to everybody who has continued to work, continued to operate, made it possible for the water to come out of my spigot and for the groceries to arrive at my grocery store. And so forth. So thank you very much for what everybody is doing.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you said that. Absolutely, we couldn't, even all of us as a society, be limping along as well as we are without all of you on the front lines, for sure. Well, thank you so much, and everybody enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you have a healthy, safe, and enjoyable weekend, and we will see you again next Friday.